It's a Dungeons & Dragons podcast that'll really make you think. We're spicing up the rules, mashing up the homebrews, and stirring up the debates. Add a little touch of our own, and you have Chef Bolgg and the Pirate Captain's recipes for everything. With your host, the Pirate Captain.
It's not because I took on an entire ship by myself and walked away unscathed just off good looks alone.
Chef Bolgg.
I have in my rules for the original AG. Don't be a dick.
And Loc the Bard.
Loc the Bard bans all bards from his campaign. That wouldn't go over very well.
And without further ado, here are your hosts.
Well, that is it. This be another episode with me and my bestest of buddies, old Chef Bolgg. Good job. More episodes. And as, of course, our favorite little bard, Loc. I took you off mute there, buddy. Ungagged the gag. But welcome, everybody. We are here for another episode. It is me, the Pirate Captain, with my good looks and everything. And this is going to be a fun another episode. I am excited because last week's, what was it? 2 weeks ago now? Yeah, 2 weeks
Something
ago.
Like
Yeah. 2 weeks ago that we did an episode, and we had James S. Austin on. It was a great time. That episode got a lot of traction. I was surprised. A lot of people liked it. And make sure you guys go find him. His details are all in the post that we did, as well as find us on Facebook, Chef Bolgg and Pirate Captains. You can email us, chefbolgandpc@gmail.com. And share, subscribe, do whatever you can wherever you're at to podcast. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell anybody about it. We do have a special guest coming up here in a couple weeks in February. He's going to be exciting. It is a professor at a local Florida university. He is a D&D aficionado. His latest thesis is what we're going to be talking about with him is going to be on that episode. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. It's very important that you guys listen in for that one. He's going to be an amazing guest. I'm excited for him, and hopefully, go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
No, I'm excited to talk about it. Reading through it, it's gonna be a hell of a conversation. Especially for maybe some younger players who this is a big deal for them, having representation in games and that kind of thing. For us older gamers, let me just play an elf.
Yeah.
Can I please? But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a good talk.
Well, and yet again, I want to make sure I throw it out to the man that really brought this guy to our attention. It actually brought us to his attention. That is, Loc the Bard. Look, you've done an absolute amazing job. So just want to mark out to you for a little bit.
It's that level 18 charisma.
Oh, is that what it is? It only took him 17 levels to get it down, right? How many times did he strike out?
Not quite a 20 yet. I'm not quite there yet.
Oh, I am so happy where this podcast has gone. It started off shaky in the last year when we started it out, with cancer, the army, and everything else, and now we've kind of like starting to come into our own. We're working out deals. We're doing things. It's only going to get bigger from here.
Hopefully, it's not like podcast from the recent Ghostbusters movie, and we find our voice in episode 46. Can we do it early, please?
Oh man, I think we have found our voice. I love that movie, and I was glad it came out. But yes, I really hope maybe Dan Aykroyd listens to us, and he's like, "No, you guys found your voice in episode 10 or 6, as it seems."
Apparently, yeah.
Episode 6 is where it's at. That was actually the missing episode that was the first episode you had went missing because you were doing cancer treatments. You couldn't talk. And if you actually listened between episodes 6 and 10 and you hear Bolgg, he's all scruffy and sounding like he's trying to find Bane in Gotham City. It's because he was going through cancer, and you sound so much better.
Yep.
But that was the episode with me and Loc, and I don't even know what we talked about. I need to go back and listen to it, but that is still everybody's favorite episode is episode number 6. Or maybe that's just the one you're sharing with everybody.
What, me? No, I wouldn't do that. I just listen to it over and over on repeat all the time.
Listen to that sexy sounding, smooth talking pirate captain. Loc, I'm still in the room with you. Can you please put your pants back on? But with that being said, let's we got a few topics out for today. I'm excited about these. I think some of these are going to like hit home with certain people. Definitely like wording in the rules. Is something that is first on my list. So let's go ahead and get into that, because you guys were talking about having a friend of ours that was playing with an app, and he couldn't.
Not just a friend of ours. It was me. I was the one who was using the app. It was my character, But the friend of ours,
who was the DM, was not me.
That's impossible.
He thought it was impossible what I was trying to do because with the way the app worded it was that I dealt 2d6. It was the Rune Knight, and I was using the Fire Rune. I deal 2d6 damage when I invoke it, and the target has to make a strength save, or be restrained, not grappled or restrained. And he didn't understand how a Fire Rune would be able to do that. Well, in Tasha's, it actually states it's Fire Shackles.
Yeah.
That's what the Fire Rune is. So it's much clearer in that than it is in the app, and I think it's important to have some of the wording discussions with a lot of these third-party apps, because of trademark and copyright and that kind of thing. You have to be careful about how you word it, but it also can lead to some issues in game.
Yeah, their licensing will have something where they've paid for the right to use the D&D logo and D&D calculations, but they didn't pay for the right for the Tasha quotings because D&D wants too much money because it's their new moneymaker.
Yeah,
and so then they stick it in there with a abridged shorthand for the rules, and that can lead to some confusion.
Well, this
Still
goes
need
back,
the book.
This goes back to my argument about technology versus having these papers and stuff like that. This is why it's important to have those, because it's always rules as written. I see that a lot in the forums and the Reddit chats, that it's always rules as written. And if your rules are written differently because of what you have versus what I have, like now if you've got the book, let's say you have a digital copy of the book, okay, obviously you're reading the rules as written, but if you have a Fire Shackle versus a Fire Rune, now you're starting to get into questionable territory.
Well, it even goes beyond that. Certain applications out there will update with the erratas.
Yeah.
So you will have the language of the most current errata instead of the original book language. If your DM's playing based on a rule that's in the book, it may be different than what the errata has changed it to.
It makes me wonder how the 5e wiki gets away with everything, because that's usually where, like, when I reference something here on the show, I always reference the 5e wiki, and that is one of my favorite little things. So how do we do? How does it get away with that sort of publication errors and stuff like that? Like, what am I missing that I haven't gotten from a book? Because I don't own every book. I don't buy module books. I only buy books that have either race updates or class updates, like items and stuff like that. There's no reason for me to have a module.
You buy the player books.
Right.
You're a player. That's
mostly, I don't DM very often. I don't have that time, so I'm mostly a player. And now that you have that issue with, okay, well, it's a Fire Rune in my handheld, but my book says it's a Fire Shackle. Like, how did you guys overcome that? Like obviously he wasn't too happy. Like, I'm not saying that he was pissed off or mad about it, but he wasn't like.
Well, the way that we did it is we just simply looked it up in the book, and the app has it correctly. The actual description is correct, but the wording of the description made it seem like it was based on just a straight up fire ability. It didn't have a name. It didn't have a specific wording to it, which is what was confusing him.
Yeah, the app pared it down to function only. It didn't have the descriptors. It didn't have the flowing language. It didn't have the visual for him to see it in his head. It's like, it makes no sense. Your flaming axe is hitting somebody. Why are they grappled? That doesn't make any sense to me. And sometimes logic and magic, sometimes it don't make sense. Yeah. But in this case, they actually have a in-game reason why this is happening.
And when I started with this class, I actually didn't have Tasha's. I actually got Tasha's. My lovely wife got me Tasha's for Christmas. But I was using the RuneNet because it was something that interested me from Tasha's.
Yeah.
And the app had the information there. It just didn't have the wording, and I've even been confused by some of the wording sometimes.
And 2 or 3 of us at the table would have the Tasha's also, so that that's the advantage to playing with big groups. Not everybody has to have every book.
We have a friend. We're trying to get him in here that doesn't own a single book. And that's the thing. When you come to a lot of tabletop games, and Wizards is really big with this because Wizards has they have like almost a monopoly on tabletop gamings. You're talking about Magic the Gathering, HeroClix, D&D. Wording is very important. The difference between and or is vital. All right, for those of you who play Magic the Gathering, you're very well attributed to that because what something can do versus what it could do, and that's the big thing. And with not third-party products, that's a different topic. But reading these rules, it's very important that we have them down there. And we've talked about it in earlier episodes where it's always DM. It's usually going to be DM's discretion ahead of time. Now, when we had James on a couple of weeks ago, he mentioned, there's that unwritten contract, where you're not trying to screw the player over. So no, it's not that somebody's trying to essentially screw the player over. But I think now that you have these rules that are differently written, it makes my argument a little bit better of why you should at least have a book. Somebody should at least have that book out there. I really want to lean more towards players having paper copies of things.
We are lucky that at least one of us has whatever book that we need. We have a family that plays with us. They usually buy the new books as soon as they come out. I think Fizzbands is one of the only one of the ones that we don't have that we want.
I have it. Just the person who was supposed to bring it last night forgot it at their house.
There hasn't been honestly since Tasha's really kind of like opened the world up a little bit to where you really don't need a whole lot of the other books unless they're doing there's not been a whole real reason to have new races anymore because of Tasha's, because you can essentially create your own race. But some of these books and stuff like that, if you don't have like enough new player class subclasses, no, I'm really not that interested in it. We talked about it a couple weeks ago too. As something was a crafter's class, and that would be a book I would buy if there was something that brought in like a whole new class, something we haven't seen before.
And there are third-party products out there that do that. It's just they're not official. They're not applicable if you play in Adventures League. Mm-hmm. They're
how many
they may break the game balance because again, who knows how they were tested. But those things do exist out there. There's homebrew ones out there. There's
how many people though do we know that are actually playing in Adventures Leagues though anymore? Like because of the pandemic, that's the big thing. That's really going to be the factor here. Is like because of the pandemic, how many people do we know that are actually playing in? And we're broadcasting here out of Florida, so everything's open. Yeah. But
I know one of the local shops still on their regular Sunday Adventures League game is, where they have 8 or 10 tables.
Are they full though? Like full, or just like
I haven't. I personally wouldn't go to an 8 or 10 table.
Yeah, that does seem like a lot.
Crowded. I mean, game shops are generally not that big, but last time I was there, they were pretty full. Now some of the other, but most of these shops are only doing those at most once a week. You don't have those games every night of the week. And some of the shops, especially the smaller shops that I had smaller crowds to begin with, those have kind of stopped doing anything just because.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, with these third parties and stuff like that, we've talked about that. DMs, it's always DM's discretion. Right. Like it's you guys are going to decide as the rulers of your world, as the gods of your world, what is and isn't allowed. And I'm always fine for the most part with people kind of creating new things. I was talking about a character I wanted to play for your latest campaign. I've just been busy and wasn't able. I wanted to create a feat that really doesn't do anything but allows me to take your panties, because I was going to you have this carnival themed thing going on, and I was like, well, he could be like a little sideshow, and part of his little sideshow act is he can like remove the underwear of anything, and he's actually just a perv. He's a panty thief. He doesn't actually do anything other than just take people's panties or women's panties. You never know. Yeah.
But Apasai from Ranma 1/2.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. But that's it would be a useless feat almost.
The Konosuba thief.
Yeah.
I love creating characters with weird tropes like that, like something that makes them absolutely unique to the world.
Yeah, and as a DM, the DMs are more likely to pull in third-party stuff, I think, than some of the players a lot of times. I personally used to use before I got so dependent on the apps, which I'm kind of winning your argument for you from previous.
Thank you.
2 or 3 episodes ago, and I was the apps are the way to go. The apps are the way to go, and I've realized recently I used to use the Toma Beasts 1 and 2 a lot to pull monsters out of. ever since I got this 5e companion app that has all the monster manual monsters in it but doesn't have third-party monsters in it, it's much easier to build an encounter when I can just add them to the app and not pull and not have to create these third parties into the. I mean, a lot of the apps have where you can add your own stuff to them, but the fact that they're not there means I don't use them as much as I used to, which means instead of having, I don't know how many monsters are in the monsters manuals and tomophos and all those other stuff out there, and, instead of having 1,000 monsters, we're only getting 500 of them instead, so you're limiting yourself, especially at the higher level stuff.
I think, and I can see that, but I think you're also like limiting your creativity when it comes to these third party, because I feel like everybody's seen the new season of The Witcher, right?
Yeah.
All right, so they knew. Spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't watched it. It's been more than 2 weeks. That's my spoiler alert. My spoiler rule for anything. Anything after 2 weeks, it's your own fault. But they encountered new versions of creatures they had already known about that weren't weak to the same things or newer things. So now you're limiting yourself to creating new monsters out of something that could be great. Yeah. Because you've gotten very reliant on this app. So now you're I feel like you're doing a disservice to your players, and it's not because you're trying to. You're just inadvertently, creating that gap.
Yeah, and it's one of those things when you have 8 players and you're trying to track initiative and you're trying to do all these things. Sometimes crowd management is a thing the app makes easier.
Yeah.
Not skipping a player. Players don't like being skipped on their turn either.
I feel that's on the player though. Yeah. Like if you're getting skipped. What were you doing during your turn that you got skipped? Were you paying attention? By the time the first round goes through, once you do initiatives, you should know who you're next to. We've done it in the past where we had like a little board where we all wrote our initiatives on the board, so you could look around, and so you knew, okay, well, Bolgg has 21, I've got 17, you've got 12, so obviously it's going to go Bolgg, PC, and Loc in that order. So if I got skipped because I was dangling around with whatever, that's my fault. That's not on the DM. I can't be mad because I missed my turn because I wasn't paying attention because, one, I wasn't prepared because what was I doing? I was dangling through some stupid app or things like that. I wasn't. By the time Bolgg is done with his turn, because Bolgg's going to eat, you get a bonus action, a free action,
movement,
and a reaction, right? So that's 4 things that you can do. All right, and usually you got to roll dice, so you got time. So by the time that's done, you've probably killed, about 2 to 3 minutes. On average, how long does one player's turn take?
And that's the thing; it's going to depend on the player, how much
On average, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying the player. On average, you're thinking about maybe 2 to 3 minutes.
It's probably closer to 5.
Okay, so I've got 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Figure out what I'm doing, how I'm going to do it. Yeah, granted, what he does can maybe affect it. Let's say he kills something. All right, well, reshoot, okay? And that may take it a little bit. But I should still know that by the time he's done, it should be my turn, though. And I get it with a bigger party size. It's a little harder. But let's add Nigglewort. And who else have we had on the show with us? Just to throw out some names. So we're going with Bolgg. Let's do PC. We'll do Loc. And then Nigglewort. Who else have we had? Okay, we'll throw in a couple names. We'll throw in the Boulder, and that'll be it. Okay, so that right there is a larger than average party size. You would say, because most games are usually about 3 to 4 players with the DM. Yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, our games, like I said, we've always played a higher number, higher capacity game. It's a social
6 to 9
game.
Players, yeah.
All right. So by the time, let's say Bolgg, by the time you get down to the Boulder, because right now the order is Bolgg, PC, Loc, Nigglewort, the Boulder. By the time we get to the Boulder should know what's kind of going on, what's happening. If we skip Nigglewort, that's not where are we going with that? Like, he should have known that his turn was there. It's time for him to go. If we skip him, he can't be mad at us. He can't be mad at the DM because you didn't call him out specifically, because you're tracking. Not only are you tracking the players, you're tracking the enemies, you're tracking the loot, you're tracking special encounters. You've got more going on. That's on the player. Absolutely on the player. Anybody disagree with me? Anybody want to fight me on that?
It goes a little further than that. The thing that got me to start using the app, actually, we had run an encounter where you were fighting 6 different creatures with different armor classes, different attack modifiers, different, where I was trying to manage their side of things as well, and having to track their hit points, their to hit, the app made that so much easier. Where I have the unicorn does this and has this AC, whereas the griffin has this AC. I could have them in the same combat because the app lets me differentiate that. Whereas when I was trying to do that with pen and paper,
I get that with pen and paper, and I think that with larger parties that helps out. But I'm still on that idea that if a player gets skipped, and I know this got vastly off topic, but I think that if a player gets skipped, it's not on the DM, it's on the player. You have to take that responsibility. It depends how they
get skipped too. Your order there. I go PC, then I go Bolgg. What are you doing? Bolgg's going to tell me what he's doing, even though he's not following PC.
I just went, yeah.
And I get that reactions too, because everybody gets a reaction can happen at any time in combat, which I get that, which can happen. But everybody is alerted of a reaction. Like you as a DM, you'll look around and you go, Boulder, Niggleward, and Loc, you guys are by the enemy. The goblin moves through you. You guys get a reaction. Okay, so that's going to throw off a little bit. But I should, as a player, know that once Bolgg goes, then Loc should be will be going right after me, even if he's across the table. He's over there. I just want to say that.
But if the DM calls on the person after you,
that you need to speak up really quickly. You have to do that as a player. And if you're not paying attention, that's on you. And I think you deserve to have your turn skipped. I know it seems kind of selfish, but like I said, you're already, as a DM, you're already tracking so many things. Yeah. How's that fair?
Yeah, no, and like I said, that is what got me into using the apps to track that stuff, because we've tried other things. Like you said, you tried the dry erase board. Some of the people out there sell the little flag things where you stack and you flip the flag when the person's taking their turn. But regardless of what it is, tracking it slows down the play. Setting that up, writing out that order. You complete that combat, you go to the next combat, you write out a new order again, whereas the app automatically generates that stuff instantly.
I think this was something of Niggleward's doing that I took from him, was initiatives were set in stone from the beginning. It may have been him or it may have been another DM that I played with, that once you rolled initiative one time, that was it until a long rest. And then you would reset it to kind of give you a chance to, that way if you were at the bottom just because of a bad roll, you could go again. But that way everything was always set. Nothing changed. The enemies, and we would give favor, you'd give favor to the players over the enemies. So the enemies would have a minus to their roll versus, they weren't going to get it, even if unless they got a natural 20 was my rule about it. A natural 20 supersedes all. They get the surprise attack. But if they got 19, it would be a 14, something that way. They weren't always coming in and bum rushing the players, but the players would have a chance to react.
Well, this brings up something that we could probably talk about in another episode is different ways of doing initiative.
That is a good one. I don't know. We're already talking about it. You might as well hit it now.
Hit it now.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of discussions I see on Facebook and Reddit on the 5e group is how to change initiative to be more engaging, to help prevent skips and that kind of thing. A lot of DMs roll initiative every round, which I think is crazy. How are you keeping track of that?
Yeah, it's hard enough to do it every fight.
Yeah, well, you got to think they're probably dealing with a small party.
A 3-person party, that's quick and easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 people under, probably you could get away with that. But with having
I don't even think you could do it with 5, because you got to think, because you're talking about 5 plus the DM,
plus
with the monsters and stuff like that, and
plus any summons and all that kind of stuff.
Well, summons usually take the role of whoever summoned them.
Right.
And some people go by simply your certain modifiers, and that number, that is your initiative score. That's it. You don't roll. There's no rolling. That is how fast you go. for I think it was a double modifier system where it was like rogues would have dexterity and intelligence, barbarians would have strength and constitution. Knowing just that modifier number, whatever it is, would be the deciding factor. And people who had just dexterity, say if you got the same number, people who had dexterity as one of their things, they would get to go first because they're faster.
And that's fine. How do you like with the tie? With the tie, there's actually no rule in the book that I remember. I think I was listening to somebody say that when it comes to a tie, it's not actually who's got a higher dexterity. That's usually used because it means you're usually more nimble. But I've never seen, and you guys can correct me where I'm wrong, or anybody out there that's listening to this can email us chefbolgg@gmail.com. Where I'm wrong, make sure you put the reference
I know what
number.
our house rules have always been.
It's always been the dexterity. I don't think there's actually a rule in the book.
Or we roll for it if it's two matching. So whoever gets the higher number, then it's not even a add your dexterity. It's just rolling them.
And as a DM, a tie, I always go to the player.
Yeah. Well, that I think is great, unless it's, like I said, unless it's a surprise attack.
Two players tied, then you got to figure, work it out between you.
No. Well, and we've done it. Like I said, that's usually whoever's got the highest dexterity. Well, then if you got the same dexterity, that's then it goes to the roll off. Yeah.
You tie on the roll off. Time to Rochambeau, something like that.
At that point, though, then you guys just deserve to sit this one out because you're too fast for us.
There are some things. I'm talking about how complex and hard initiative is, and they've already made it easier than it used to be. I miss things like weapon speed and casting time.
I miss weapon speed.
Because, the fact that, a great sword and a dagger take the same effect as far as initiative, one is harder to swing and take. There's really no reason to use smaller weapons except if you're dual wielding or something, that you have to have the light feature.
Yeah.
The mechanics of the game currently in 5e, you use the weapon that has the biggest damage production is the one you're going to use because there is no mechanical reason, with the exception of things like heavy or light or reach. Well, they don't call it reach. That's the Magic the Gathering term, but the 10-foot reach instead. Yeah.
No, I think it is reach. I think it's
is it reach?
I think it's reach.
And finesse and those little features, those matter. That's what you really focus on, and then it's damage. You don't. The fact that you're using a big two-handed sword
means you're probably going to be slower.
It should be slower than a person using a dagger, which is the advantage to the dagger. If he can stab you first and kill you before you can swing that big two-handed sword.
Yeah, but the damage is compensated there, so I get that.
Yeah, and the damage is lower because it's faster.
So.
But you lose that. And then casting time. A cantrip takes the same amount. A one-action cantrip takes the same amount of time as a one-action
fireball
9th level spell.
Right. So that's look.
It's both one action, regardless of how complex the spell is.
That's something that's always annoyed me is how the casting times in 5e, because it's a lot of your major spells, and I get it's to keep people from dual casting fireballs in a single round, where it's a bonus. I think fireballs what an action. Most your cantrips are your actions, and then I think your bonus actions are always your spells. Or did I get that backwards? Anybody?
Most spells are actions to begin with.
Right.
There are a couple like Healing Word and a couple others that are a bonus action, and then you get into that the things like the Quicken Spell, the rule where you can't cast two non-cantrip spells if one of them is a bonus action.
Yeah.
Which is often misinterpreted as you can't cast two spells. But now, if you have a way to do two actions, such as Action Surge, you could cast two full
castable spells.
Cast action spells, as long as you don't cast a bonus action spell. You can't cast that if you cast Healing Word and then try to do two spells that are in action, you can't. They have to be cantrips. If any one of your spells is a bonus action, the only other spells you can cast the rest of that time are cantrips.
Well, that brings up something that I was complaining about the other night when we were playing, is that bonus actions should be able to take the place of actions. If you want to take your time to do that bonus action as an action, what's stopping you? As long as you don't do the bonus action and another bonus action.
I agree with you, but I think it has to be that you do the bonus action always comes first, or is that the way I want to do it? I agree with you, but I think there should be like a priority. Like the action must go before the bonus action. Does that make sense? That you have to take the major before you do kind of like the extra. You see, like you got to eat your food before you get your dessert.
Yeah.
Is that because I agree with you. I think I think that's weird because this is the saying that I do the same thing. This is the same thing essentially. So
I actually saw one of the YouTube videos where I wish I could remember who it was so I could give them credit, where they were talking redoing the action economy where where you get 3 things per turn instead of a bonus action, and that includes your movement. So 15 foot, 15 foot, 15 foot. You've used everything you can do that turn.
Yeah, because that's essentially 6 seconds.
Yeah,
that's sprinting.
Yeah, whereas you take your action, you take offhand attack, and you take 15 foot of movement. Those would be your 3. Where he laid it out really well, and I really wish I could give him credit, and I'm blanking on who it was.
There's so many of them.
There's so many of them out there. Yeah.
That's
it's not my idea. That's what I'm doing. I don't want to.
I'm with you on that. I think there's a lot to that.
Where they could where you have so many things per turn, and how you distribute them and use those. Maybe a 9th level spell costs 2.
I'm down.
Maybe
I'm down for that. Like I see that being a lot more realistic to what it is because 4 things. All right, we discussed it earlier: action, bonus action, movement, reaction. Right, 4 things. Yeah. To do all those, I can move, shoot, and communicate in 6 seconds. No, you can't. There's a lot that you're doing on right there, especially if you got to say the words. You got to do. I think having an action economy is a lot better than having the current setup that it has right now.
Yeah, yeah, and realistically, you're either moving towards and then doing the attack action, or you're doing your attack action and then moving away. That would affect your accuracy. That the fact that your feet aren't planted, that you're that you are literally in motion when you're doing this attack. If you're moving towards something, you're probably hitting harder than if you're moving away from something.
Maybe give a bonus to range because you're lengthening that distance.
Yeah, extra damage if you're charging at them.
Yeah.
And now we're getting into physics actually mattering again.
I love physics in D&D. I know it doesn't matter.
And that's just the way that the systems work, because bogging down into that, you start getting to more of the realism and that kind of thing. Right. It slows play down even more.
I'm more into a lot of realistic, though, into a campaign. I admire that. I know that there's got to be a magic setting, but I admire a realistic campaign setting, like the more that you kind of like bring into it.
Well, and there are other games out there. There are other systems that do things like D&D is a heavily class-based system. Whereas
that's classist.
Yeah, it's very classist. Mm-hmm. Whereas there are other ones out there that are skill-based. You get so many skill points when you create your character. And you invest those skill points into, my character's gonna know how to sneak through the woods. I put bonuses into that. He knows how to pick pockets. I put bonuses in find trap. And yeah, you're building a thief class, but maybe your thief class that you're building doesn't ever pick pockets. You've got the locks, traps, all that kind of stuff because you're making more of a scout.
You
pick up a bow instead, or
You've essentially recreated Pathfinder 3.
Yeah, I was keeping it a generic skill-based system.
One of my favorites like that is actually it's called Basic Role Playing, and it's Supplement Classic Fantasy. It's a D100 system, and it's all based on skills. Your ability to hit, your ability to cast magic is all a skill, and you have numbers, and then you try and roll under those numbers in order to use that skill correctly. And I think that was a brilliant little system we were playing with back when I was in college. But
those systems, because they're more complicated, there's a higher threshold to entry. Mm-hmm. They're not as popular.
Right.
You're finding groups and people that have. I mean, it takes a lot more on a DM to create a villain where you have to go in and know all their different skill roles than it does to pull out generic Wizard 101.
Yeah. I mean, I've got when we were on vacation, I picked up Shadowrun 6th World, and just reading through that, I'm like, this is complicated. This is going to take a while to learn, and then have you guys learn as well if I want to run it.
Yeah. I remember the old Palladium system. You would have hours and hours of character creation where you would you'd start with your childhood. Okay, you were born to parents who did this job. Okay, then your teenage years, you did this. And doing this, you get, each thing you would acquire so many bonuses to so many skills, and by the end of it, you have all your stats, and then you start playing and you get killed in the first 3 minutes.
Yeah.
and you've another 8 hours to create another character.
And that lends itself to, well, we all know Dungeons and Dragons, we know the 5e system, where we can then go into the third-party stuff to help expand the rules, expand like the Shadowrun. I'm sure there's stuff out there for modern weapons and stuff like that in D&D 5e that I could then add in to create a cyberpunk style game.
Yeah, and the third parties. There's some we're back to where we started on this.
Very
good at going full circle.
I used to love the Tome of Beasts. Tome of Beasts gives you more monsters to use. Quite a few more monsters. Tome of Beasts 1 and 2, great books. CRs are a little calculated, might be a little off compared to the Monster Manual, but they're close enough to work.
Right.
And you've got much more dragons, much more undead, all these things you want to give variety, especially if you play a lot. It's one thing if you play once a month. If you're playing multiple games, how often do you want to fight that regular CR 1/2 zombie or skeleton?
I'm the Goblin Slayer.
Yeah,
I only want to fight goblins.
Exactly. How often do you want to fight those same? And as you get higher in level, the variety gets less because the number of things that are a CR 1 or less is a lot more than things that are CR 20 and higher.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people dismiss these third-party books because they're like, oh, well, they're glorified homebrew. Well, no, if you look at a lot of these books, there are pages of playtesters. They shout them out because this takes a lot. My homebrew, I playtest. I know a lot of people don't, but I playtest it to make sure that it's balanced so that I can pop this into any setting and it works.
And we just had somebody who essentially creates homebrew modules a couple weeks ago. James, that's what he does. All right, so you're cutting out when you cut out anything that's not in the books and Wizards of the Coast Publishing, you're really limiting yourself as a player and as a DM from these other ideas because you were telling us after we left that day that hey, look, I got actually an idea for a whole little module of my own just by what you were talking with, which is something you've wanted to mention is like how we've talked about in the past how we grab inspiration, but what do you grab inspiration from?
Me, I grab inspiration from pretty much anywhere and everything. I can pull ideas out of the ether. It actually happened not too long ago where I was at work and inspiration just hit me of how to build a Rocket League 5e class, not just a subclass for something that I've already done. No. A full class, 4 subclasses. I built it when I got home, play tested it. It's now in its final version, as you would call it.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it came out of nowhere, hit me out of nowhere. But a lot of my characters, I'll find a picture that I like, just like James did, he does with modules, and I'll build a character around that. My character for Loc's current campaign is built around that. I found a picture of a clown-like girl wielding a knife, and I was like, that would be great for a carnival, a knife thrower.
What about you, Loc? Where do you find your inspiration from?
I like to steal my inspiration from other people because I don't publish my stuff. I don't have to worry about things like copyright. so if, you give me your backstory that you don't know who your dad is. If I want to make him Darth Vader, I can make him Darth Vader because George Lucas ain't going to sue you over what's doing at your homebrew table.
Yeah.
Now publishers, they gotta worry a bit more about making sure that they're not infringing on other people's intellectual properties. And
I mean, how many times can I really tell the same old story of the Odyssey, though?
Yeah.
What's Star Wars is a very close storytelling of what?
The Seven Samurais or
something like that. Yeah, and it's just like So that I get.
But yeah, you can, and some there's really there's something like the literature majors out there will cringe but it's like there's only 7 stories or something like that where it's there's only certain types of plot points, which if people that make the study of it, there is a certain framework again, and pretty much all the DM is doing is providing a framework.
Yeah.
There's the murder mystery, there's the whodunit, there's the
world-ending thread. Yeah.
The vengeance thread.
There's only so many threads. You try to make them creative and fun and different, and you weave in what your players have provided. But sometimes if you were watching The Witcher, hey, that was a cool monster that he fought and killed in one hit. Maybe what would happen if that monster snuck up behind my players? And you throw that monster in there.
Even years ago when I started writing my novel, isekais weren't a thing. Now they are, and the way my book starts is an isekai type scenario where they fall asleep and suddenly they're in a different world. That's it's a plot hook that anybody can grasp and latch onto. That's why isekais are so huge in anime and even in lit RPGs, that kind of thing now, is because it's an easy plot hook to take, and it's free real estate. It's so easy to use.
Yeah. I like when I come up with my inspirations for stuff, I usually just come up with ideas. Like I want to see something cool, and I want to see if I can create it. It's almost like being an engineer and working backwards. I have the bridge I want to build, and I want it to do a loop-to-loop. All right, so how do I make it do a loop-to-loop? And I start building back from there. Well, you're going to need a little bit of this. Can I work it in with this? How about this? My biggest thing, I always trying to find their inspiration, and I follow, and I really wish I had thought about it and I would have pulled it up. Dan Harmon, the creator of Rick and Morty and a bunch of other stuff, he's followed this same storyline for great storytelling. That's how he's done like the Community and Rick and Morty, and that's what I usually go. And usually it's a great quest, tragedy, stuff like that.
Hero's journey.
The hero's journey, I think, is essentially what it boils down to. He's expanded on it a little bit because he's done it for so long.
Yeah, and that goes back to that's one of the 7 types. Yeah.
So I always try to and not all my characters are heroes. I usually try to make them good because when I play evil, nobody likes me.
See, when I'm creating a DM situation, campaign, one shot, my goal is you got to hook the player, and then you got to break that hook.
Yeah.
Like one of my favorite things to do. Somebody played a pacifist paladin who
oh yeah, gonna have to bring this one up.
Never wanted to kill anybody in the campaigns. Was doing non-lethal damage on the top of a staircase, and you
can't prove that I killed him.
Yeah.
All right. So let me say
you were emotionally attached to I succeeded to make you emotionally attached to that character. You cared about the actions of that character.
Yeah. And the worst part was I had only played him for like 2 episodes. That was the worst part.
That was the best part, though. See, that's my goal to get that attachment to that character.
I created such a unique character, and you wanted to kill him off in such a horrible and cruel way.
He was alive. He didn't kill. I didn't kill nobody. He was alive. He was uninjured.
If you mentally break
somebody,
they might
broken.
So what did happen?
You've mentally broken a few characters.
Because that's my favorite thing to do as a DM.
Protagonist abuse is a very fun thing to do.
So what had happened was we were told that we needed to get to the top of this tower, tippy top of a tower, and we needed to save somebody up there. I had a paladin that was a pacifist. I was like, I think it was let me pull up the D&D of the paladins real quick because I can look at it and tell you, that's who it was. So the paladin I was playing was like, hey, look, I don't use I think it's devotion. Yeah, it's either devotion or no, it was redemption, because redemption's the one like, hey, look, I have failed in my past and I want to be somebody better. So I was a redemption paladin. I was like, all right, because he's got a really cool oath spells that really help him take no damage, i.e. sanctuary. Where as long as people fail to beat my wisdom save, I think it's a wisdom save. Pulling it up right now. But as long as people fail to, you ward a creature within range against attack. Until the spell ends, any creature who targets the warded creature with an attack or a harmful spell must first make a wisdom saving throw. On a fail save, the creature must choose a new target or lose the attack or spell. So I was like, I'm going to run in And I did, and I ran all the way to the top of the tower, made it without ever getting anybody to attack me. And I had this, if you're thinking of World of Warcraft, think Leroy Jenkins, because that's what I did. I Leroy Jenkins my ass all the way up to the top of the tower. I was like, all right, now I'm going to walk down. Well, eventually you're going to have to run into somebody. I had to fight something. I was like, all right, non-lethal damage, shield bash, non-lethal damage, shield bash, non-lethal damage, shield bash. And I hit this dude, and apparently somebody wanted to go, well, you know what, falling down the stairs counts as damage. I was like, what? No, that's not fair. I didn't hurt him. And he's like, well, you hit him. You were the last one to hit him, ipso facto. And I thought that was the biggest bull crap I've ever heard in my life. And that poor character who was just trying to, like, save somebody from the tower. Yeah, I'm glad he walked off in the sunset. He didn't deserve what you did to him.
But you cared. That's the thing. It wasn't a throwaway. You know, you wanted your character to keep his oath, and you were put with a moral dilemma that you actually had to think about.
Well, he should have changed into Oathbreaker after that, I honestly believe.
I believe he changed into what, a Death Knight?
Eventually.
Oh,
Eventually.
Yeah, he eventually gave him.
Yeah. I like to throw the callbacks and pull.
And
in a future campaign, since that one walked into the sunset and died in a car crash.
not saying
he didn't die in the game. He just walked away.
And we're not saying that we were metagaming when that came along, but we did change his throne room a bit because his throne was on the floor, and then suddenly it was on a raised dais with stairs.
I hate y'all so much. Such a great character. I really wish I could remember
his name. That's why I brought
him
back.
I like to give myself. I give myself credit. I create some really fun and unique characters. I'm really upset that I still haven't gotten to play in your campaign. I know it's gone on for a couple weeks now, and I'm going to get back around to it, but I still want to create that panty thief. But it goes back to the idea where I get the inspiration from. I was like, you know what would be really fun? Just something just ridiculously stupid is a character that, he just steals women's panties. And I think that's like a fun, unique concept. I usually start from a concept. So I have this little thought cloud. What if, a what if question almost, if you will. And then I start branching off from there. And then I was like, oh, well, then you can do this. And then what can you do that? Why does he want to steal panties? I took a class in college for screenwriting, and that's where I started getting these damn what if ideas. So that's how I get it. So.
Yeah, the creative process is the individual's design. For me, a lot of it, like I said, comes from the ether. I just come up with ideas out of the blue. And it annoys the crap out of me because it always happens when it is the most inconvenient. Like when you're at work. When you're on your commute. When you're trying to go the fuck to sleep.
Well, I tell you what
it
you
is
do.
The worst.
You do what I do. I carry a pen and paper wherever I go. And I'll stop and take a note. Even if I got to text it to myself, my Facebook Messenger is filled with nothing but messages to myself. Hey, what about this, this, and this? Don't forget this. Do that to yourself. It'll save you so much time. I love that.
I mean,
but you can't text while driving.
The hell, I can't take a voice memo though.
That is it. I use the Samsung Notes with the voice stuff when I'm driving. Yep. And yes, I do use a Samsung. And if you use an iPhone, you're wrong.
Yeah. Well, no one asked for your communist opinion anyway.
Unless iPhone decides to sponsor our podcast, and then which
you're
case
the greatest.
All right, I have the question of the week. All right, so last time I want to start doing this, and I think this is going to be like a fun little thing that we do here. We're going to call it the question of the week, where we come up with one really good question to ask you guys, and it'll be a poll. If you go to Spotify, you can find it in our poll. Last week's, or a couple weeks ago now that I think about it, a couple weeks ago, the question was, is a +1 item magical or non-magical? Guys, go over there, check the results out. You're going to be upset with it. I know I was. But this week's question, do you award inspiration? Do you award the inspiration mechanic? So essentially the inspiration is a special mechanic that DMs can give out for either good role-playing, good teamwork. They can give it out for whatever. And you keep track of these inspiration points. And what they essentially do is they give you advantage on something, or they remove disadvantage, because it's like a benefit for being like a good boy. It's like you're giving a dog a treat for sitting down. And that's how I feel. I'm with Loc. Loc, I'm 100% agreement with you. I think it's a useless mechanic. Absolutely. I'd rather see it in the form of experience or something.
It's the best mechanic I never use.
I don't even think it's the best mechanic that anybody ever uses. I think it's an overrated mechanic. And you can fight me on it. And the reason I say that is...
it's positive reinforcement. If you need it, to change your player's behavior. It's there for you.
I don't even think, like, why would you want to, like...
I just prefer to give them negative reinforcement and beat them down.
Yeah, that's my problem with it as a mechanic, is that you can give inspiration for good behavior, but what about a bane for bad behavior? If they're doing stuff that's against their character, if they're not paying attention during the game, that kind of thing,
I think
you should be able to go, okay, no, you get a bane point. I'm going to bring that up at some point, and you're going to have disadvantage.
Well... Yeah, no, I can see that, but then I'd have to give out things for being a good player, and I'm just not. You should be a good player when you come to the board, right? You don't have to be a great player. You don't have to be an experienced player. You should just be a good person, good player, all right? And a good player doesn't mean that you know your rules, that you're not losing out on your turn, that you have everything written down. No, just a good player means you come in there, you're being a part of the game, you're engaging with people. That's it. That's being a good player. Why do you deserve a treat just because you're there?
Oh, I like the idea. I don't like the practice.
For me, it's you give it out when something is inspired, but doesn't necessarily work that way. Like, I was bringing up something a couple weeks ago. It happened it didn't happen in our game, but it could have happened. Is that I'm Rune Knight. I have the ability to go into a giant form, makes me large. You can raise your hand above your head. You're half again your height. So basically, at giant form, I could grapple somebody, pick them up, raise them up above my head, and then slam them into the ground, and only deal 2d6 plus 1 plus my strength modifier.
But why do you deserve a inspiration point
because
for that?
Because then at that point the DM can go, well, that's inspired what you're trying to do. It doesn't work that way. So I'm sorry, but here's an inspiration point for coming up with something so cool.
No, because you got an inspiration point for breaking the rules. Well, not even breaking the rules, but for trying to find a loophole that the DM says, no. Because it's their discretion, and now you're trying to tell me that you're getting a participation trophy just because you decided to read.
Well, that's other things fall into the same category. You know, having a trap that your players think critically about and get around without having to set it off or stuff like that.
You're getting points for playing the game.
Yeah, I would use it more along the lines of if the player makes me laugh.
That's easy.
You know?
I've gotten you to laugh on a lot of things.
That's where I would use it more, because if somebody's making the game more fun. I like the fact that there is a mechanism in the game that you can reward that player for making the game more fun. Like I said, I never use it. But I like the fact that it could be used if I wanted to.
I think that there should be something else that we give. I like giving maybe like an extra 100 experience points at the end of the game for them. I'm more like receptive to the level, because obviously 100 experience at level 1 is going to like super boost you. Well,
and in the old days that would matter, where you had individual experience and most people weren't playing Milestone. And nowadays experience don't mean nothing anymore.
That's true. I'd like to see. Well, maybe giving them a special, like a point. Like, I don't know. I think giving them. I think giving an award to somebody who's already just playing the game to play the game is kind of counterproductive. Yeah, it does encourage good behavior, but then that's what they're going to be expecting every time. Every time they sit down, they're like, "Okay, cool. Where's my inspiration point just for being here?" And you're like, "Yeah, that's not how it works." And now you've started. They're like, "Well, I got it last time I did this. Now why am I not getting it this time?" So now you're creating that codependency on it. I'm okay with granting something for something, but it's got to be worth something. Doing it like the way you guys are saying, I'm just not seeing it. I don't think you. I think it's a mechanic that's honestly the game's overusing. I think we could find something better to give them for their time.
I don't.
You don't use it, right?
I don't use it.
I don't use it either. I'm just
most of the live stream games that I've seen don't use it.
So why do we even have it then?
Because there are those out there who feel like they don't get enough, and this is probably just a placation.
And it's a teaching mechanism.
That too. It could be used.
What am I teaching you?
Well, you get a group that's a completely new group, and you want to reward the ones that are playing correctly. It's a reward. That's all it is. You have something you can give them.
I will say that the most inspiration I've ever seen given out was at Adventurers League.
I don't even like Adventurers League. I don't even get why you would do it there, because then that carries over into somebody else who you may end up stepping into their side one time.
I think in the rules you have to use it in that session.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure.
I'd like to see the clarification on that. I just don't think that giving inspiration, because like I said, I'm rewarding you for playing a game that you're voluntarily here for. It's not like somebody set you down.
That reward is also so small. I mean, most people. I mean, if you're using flanking rules, if you're using, pack tactics or half a dozen other, rules, you can get advantage pretty easily.
Yeah.
I would rather just give you. I don't know.
Well, and
first off, I would change it. First, you're not getting advantage, or you're not removing advantage. Maybe like a reroll. Like every inspiration is worth one reroll.
In some ways, that's all advantage really is.
Yeah.
Just rolling it at the same time.
Yeah. But this one gives you like where you can reroll and determine. I would rather use this one. I would be more okay with that versus like usually at advantage you take the higher.
Right.
Versus this is a reroll that you get to control. You're like, you know what? I would rather have this one. So in case you roll lower, you get to like a damage die reroll. I could deal with that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it boils down to us older heads. We are so set in our ways that giving stuff out is it's just part of the experience. So why would we give out something extra that they're already dealing with? Plus the coming up with a clever way to deal with something, that's reward in and of itself.
Yeah.
It also lets the stingy DMs who don't give magic items ever, who rarely ever give gold, I'm talking to you, Nigglewort.
Nigglewort.
You're a level 1 fighting level 15 monsters, and you get 3 gold.
Yeah.
It gives them something else they could give their players that's not gonna, that's not gonna throw off long term.
I would say that would be something that it could be used for is a reward substitute when you don't want to give out something like that.
So you're thinking like a barter system. I could see that being a little bit more reasonable. Like if you have like an adventurers guild with like a shop or something, like you can use that to like trade it, like get a little bit extra value on something. Like, oh, hey, look, I'm trading in this 3 wolf carcasses that I have. Well, okay, normally it's worth 2 silver, but you give me an inspiration point, I'm going to double it.
Now you got advantage on that persuasion check.
You're not getting advantage. You're just giving, I don't know. I just don't see him giving it out because like, I'm rewarding you for playing a game that, like I said, you're voluntarily here to play. Yeah. If you don't, I'm not going to try and persuade you into better behavior. I'm going to try and help you out and become a better player as a DM. So if you're doing bad things, I'm going to go, hey, man, maybe we should, try it this way. If you don't want to do it.
You are rewarding your players for defeating their monsters, getting through their obstacles.
So then why am I double rewards?
With treasure. Well, this is an alternate. That and you're not giving them treasure, you're not giving them gold, you're not giving them titles and power that has a long-term
That's almost a big FU though. If you
Oh yeah, I agree. That's why I don't use it.
Yeah, and that's.
But it is a low-risk reward that you can give them that's not going to affect your long-term campaign. You give somebody a +5 luck blade, that's going to affect the rest of your campaign.
Yeah. I'm not giving somebody a +5 anything.
Yeah.
First off. It was bad enough that it's bad enough that I persuaded somebody once to give me a +3 shield to borrow.
But for me, it has to be something special. But if it's already something special, they should be getting something out of it anyway.
But that's the thing. Is like usually once you're at the end of the encounter or the end of the chapter of that Adventurers Guild, the mission, whatever you're talking about, at the end of it, you're going to get something out of it. I just don't see. Well, little Timmy, you did really well. Let's go ahead and give you an inspiration point because you were here. No, but hey, bud, you did a really good job. Let's you and your party can look out over the loot rules and figure out what you guys are going to get. Now, if one person's being stingy on that, and Nigglewort, we're going to end up having these issues, and I get that. But that's not going to be something I can like go, oh well, you didn't get enough gold this time, so we'll give you the inspiration point.
But it gives that style of DM who doesn't want to get you. And until you get to the big boss, you are going to stay with the basic equipment and you're going to have no money. But when you fight these little bosses, here's a reward for being the guy who landed the final blow on the mini boss. You get this little inspiration point that you can use that really has a very minor of effect.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, just to clear the table here. We're all saying no. It doesn't need to be a mechanic.
We're all playing devil's advocate for a rule we don't use and don't like.
Oh man,
I'm arguing that there is a very specialized, specific case where you might think about.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even think about it. There's no way. There's no reason to even think that.
Yeah.
If I'm not,
You don't fall into that.
if I'm not engaging my players enough to where they want to stay, and I have to give them rewards like that to get them to stay, I need to rethink what I'm doing. I need to go back and adjust my strategy. Are they RPers? Do they want to RP a little bit more? Are they combat focused? Should I combat focus them? Are they a mixture of the both? Should I figure out the rebalance? We talked about that in the last episode.
Well, and there are DMs out there, especially some of the newer DMs, who have a really hard time with some things, like invisibility or flying. There's certain DMs that ban those spells from their game because they can't handle their players having that. Those same kind of DMs they're probably having problems when their players get plate mail because now they're harder to hit. They're having problems with that player gets a magic weapon because now their monsters are no longer resistant to everything and they're getting killed a lot faster. And it's something for those DMs who just have to be stingy, keep everybody at under level 5. Campaign ends at level 5 because you can't handle powerful characters.
But that's telling me that you're not learning.
Right.
So you need to go back and reassess.
I
You maybe need to come back and listen to old Chef Bolgg and Pirate Captain's recipes for everything and figure out, well, maybe there's something I'm doing that I'm just not getting.
Yeah, if you're having that many restrictions at your table, you should rethink your DM style, I think.
Maybe go back and play a few games more.
Play a little bit more. Use those spells against another DM and see how they react. As a DM, throw everything you've got at me. Yeah. I want to see it. I want to come up with ways to defeat it myself. So go ahead. Yeah, throw it at me.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of any spells. I've talked about before. There's a couple magic items I do ban, but those aren't because they're going to break anything. It's just I feel it gives certain players unfair advantage over other players. That's why I'm banning them. It's not. I don't ban the wish spell. If you've got to the point where you're high enough level to cast the wish spell, go ahead and cast it. Yeah, you're fighting Tarrasques and god level monsters. You're gonna need a wish
to survive
anyway.
You're
gonna need that wish.
Yeah, you're not banning sharpshooter. You're making it so that we have to declare it and it as one attack, so monks can't abuse it.